You talk about this man named Service, who was...
John Stewart Service, yes.
Tell us a little bit about him.
Okay, John Stewart Service was State Department, a diplomat serving in Chongqing, China in the 1940s during World War II and a little bit thereafter, who was sending back this kind of information about Chiang Kai-shek. He was living in Chongqing with two, not one, but two Soviet agents. One was a man named Solomon Adler, who was an attaché, the Treasury attaché in Chongqing, who was Soviet agent, communist, who was a direct subordinate to Harry Dexter White, another Soviet agent and communist, White being back here in Washington, Adler being his minion in the field in Chongqing. And the other Soviet agent living with John Stewart Service was a Chinese, ethnic Chinese named Chi Chao-ting, who was a Comintern Soviet agent, a dispatched agent who was there infiltrating the government of Chiang Kai-shek in behalf of Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai. These are two people living with John Stewart Service in Chongqing. Adler, in particular, in Service, collaborated on dispatches sent back, trashing Chiang Kai-shek, praising the communists who were in Yan'an in northwest China, and saying, in essence, we need to get rid of Chiang Kai-shek and embrace the communists, and that, in fact, did happen. Service then came back after...
So the story that policymakers in Washington were getting from the field in China about what was going on in China was designed to make us throw over Chiang Kai-shek and embrace the communists.
And succeeded.
And the people who are giving us that story were communists.
Correct. Well, certainly some of them we know are...
At least two of the people in that house.
Two of them are not only communists, but Soviet agents. We know that. Both Adler and Chi Chao-ting, Service's two housemates. Adler was his roommate, and Chi lived upstairs.
And Adler's an American. And
Adler was actually a Brit, naturalized American, who got hired in the Treasury Department somehow before he was ever a citizen.
You have a Brit, naturalized American, Soviet agent, living in a house with a Chinese national Soviet agent.
Chinese communist infiltrator of the national government, yeah.
In the same house with
John Stewart Service.
Major State Department personnel.
The most important single U.S. diplomat in China, collaborating with the Soviet agent Adler and a little bit with Chi Chao-ting around the edges, sending back these reports saying Chiang Kai-shek was evil, Chinese communists were wonderful. And he said over and over again, when China fell to the communists, both Chi Chao-ting and Solomon Adler absconded to Beijing and lived out their lives there as servants of the Mao Zedong government that they had helped bring to power.
So Adler went from being a Brit to being an American to being a Chinese.
That was his true spiritual home.
Always a communist.
Always a communist, at least as far as we know. He was identified by Elizabeth Bentley, also by Chambers. They both knew that Adler was a Red, and also he's in the Venona trench coat.
So if you look at the picture, before Joe McCarthy arrives on the scene, you have this situation where the government of the United States has actively recruited, in some circumstances, communists to join the government.
Yeah.
There are communist, even Soviet agents who have very strategically infiltrated certain parts of the U.S. government and affect our foreign policy.
Correct.
To the degree that it aids the aims of the Soviet Union in advancing their cause in the world.
Absolutely.
In Yugoslavia and in China.
Correct.
And then there's the question of, our views shift toward the Soviet Union.
Well, when World War II concluded, the Cold War started, a lot of people were caught out there, having done all this stuff, and tried to backtrack and cover it up and whatnot. And there was a lot of covering up, big time. And the FBI got on the trail of a lot of these folks very early in the 40s, not late, but 42, 43, they had a report, for example, to go back to somebody I mentioned before, December of 1942, had a wiretaps. They did a lot of wiretapping, Jerry, and a good thing they did, I can tell you that.
Did they have warrants for all this, Stan?
They did not have warrants. They had...
FDR was letting the FBI do warrantless surveillance?
They did a lot of warrantless surveillance, fortunately, for the country. Because they were all over these communists, following them around. They wiretapped them, they bugged their rooms, they opened their mail. It was really awful.
And part of the research that went into this book and why some of these things happen is you've been able to go back and look at FBI reports.
I have. They're right down the hall. We have 100,000 pages of them right down the hall.
100,000 pages of FBI reports. And a lot of these are based on transcripts and reports of the surveillance that was done on these people.
Quite a few of them are wiretap transcripts of wiretaps. But
so this isn't ambiguous evidence. These are the actual words out of the mouths of the people who are in this book.
And to come back around to Oppenheimer, what is in these reports, and I reproduced this in my book, is something that's obviously a wiretap. They don't say it. They often say, according to a confidential source or something like that. But this is it's a chapter called The Trouble with Harry. And this is a page, photographic reproduction of a page from an FBI report on J. Robert Oppenheimer. I don't know if you picked that up from, it's pretty small.
This was when J. Robert Oppenheimer was involved in the Manhattan Project and was at Los Alamos?
That was just coming into being. And what the FBI reported at that time, and it reads as follows. I quoted the book and then I photographically reproduced it so people can see it for themselves. In December 1942, mind you, Julius Robert Oppenheimer was the subject of a discussion between Steve Nelson, who was an itinerant Soviet commissar, very famous communist, who'd been in the Spanish Civil War, all over the place, and Bernadette Doyle, organizational secretary of the Communist Party for Alameda County, California. That's where Berkeley is. You know better than I do, right? At this time, Steve Nelson stated that Dr. Hannah Peters had been to visit him, and she had stated that Dr. Oppenheimer, because of his employment on a special project, that's the Manhattan Project just getting started, could not be active in the party. There's more. It gets better. Bernadette Doyle answered Nelson by saying that she believed the matter should be taken up with the state committee regarding the two Oppies, meaning Oppenheimer and his wife, inasmuch as they were regularly registered and everyone knew that they were Communist Party members. Now this is the communists themselves saying that J. Robert Oppenheimer is a secret communist, but he's got to lie low because he's got this job. And then they have other similar...
This is the FBI knowing that this is
absolutely
the case.
Not only did the FBI know it, they reported all this to the authorities.
Right.
And during
this is from the wiretap?
Yeah, that's an obvious wiretap. They don't say it, but the only thing that could have been other than a wiretap would have been a microphone bug. But the way they handled it, I think it's a wiretap.